The softball flew through the dark alley like a bullet. Perfect arc, perfect speed, perfect aim. It struck the knife-wielder's temple with a crack that echoed off brick walls. The blade clattered to the asphalt. The man dropped. 14-year-old Amara Thompson stood frozen, arms still extended from the throw. She'd been cutting through this alley for 3 years, same route home from her evening shift at the grocery store. Tonight, she heard a scream. The man in the expensive suit staggered backward, gasping, blood on his collar. 2 masked attackers, one now running, the other dazed on the ground. As the runner disappeared into the darkness, he screamed back, "James Thompson's daughter just saved you!" Amara frozen. James Thompson. Her father. Dead 3 years. These men were complete strangers. She'd never seen them before. How did they know her father's name? And why say it now? Like a curse. Like a warning. Amara woke to the sound of a leaking faucet. The apartment was tiny. 1 bedroom split into 2 by a bedsheet hung on a rope. She shared her half with her 9-year-old brother Jaden, who was still asleep, one leg hanging off the edge of their shared mattress. 6:15 a.m. Her mother was already gone. A yellow sticky note on the refrigerator. Leftovers in the blue container. Get Jaden to school on time. Love you. Mom. Shanice Thompson worked 2 jobs. Morning shift at the hospital cafeteria, evening shift cleaning office buildings. Amara hadn't seen her mother sit down for a full meal in 2 years. She heated up rice and eggs, shook Jaden awake, and made sure he brushed his teeth, got him dressed, grabbed her backpack, inside, wrapped in a towel, the softball from last night. She'd retrieved it from the alley before the police arrived. On the bus to school, Amara pulled out a folded newspaper clipping from her pocket. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft from being touched too many times. Construction accident claims. 6 lives. Thompson family demands investigation. Her father's face stared back at her from the photo. James Thompson, 36, master welder. The article was 3 years old. She remembered the day he taught her to throw. "Accuracy, baby girl," he'd said, guiding her hand into the perfect grip. "Power doesn't matter if you can't hit your target. One perfect throw can change everything." He'd been right about that. "You okay?" Amara looked up. Her best friend Tiana slid into the seat beside her, backpack thudding against the window. "You look like you saw a ghost," Tiana said. Amara folded the newspaper clipping, slid it back into her pocket. "I think I did." 8 miles away, Richard Whitmore woke to silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, a grid of steel and glass stretching to the horizon. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of Whitmore Tower, 4,200 square feet, more space than most families would ever need. He lived there alone. His assistant, Jessica, arrived at 7 with coffee and a tablet. "Police report came in," she said, swiping through files. Both attackers fled the scene. One was identified through facial recognition from a traffic camera 2 blocks away. Richard's ribs still ached from the punch he'd taken. A bruise was forming on his shoulder. "Who was he?" "Marcus Rivera, 51, former foreman on your Riverside Luxury Towers project." Jessica hesitated. "His employment file says he was terminated after the 2022 collapse incident." Richard's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "That was years ago," he said. "We settled with the families. It's over." "Did we?" Jessica pulled up another file. 6 families sued, 5 accepted settlements and signed NDAs, 1 didn't. "Which one?" Jessica turned the tablet toward him. A photo appeared. A woman in her late 30s with exhausted eyes, standing beside a teenage girl with a defiant expression. "Thompson family," Jessica said. "Father James Thompson, deceased. Widow Shanice Thompson. Daughter Amara Thompson, age 14. Richard stared at the girl in the photo, the same girl who'd thrown the softball, the same girl who'd saved his life. "That's her," he whispered. Jessica nodded slowly. "She's the daughter of the man who died building your property. And Marcus Rivera, the man who attacked you last night, was his supervisor the day of the collapse." Richard set down his coffee. His hand was shaking. Why would Rivera attack me? We gave him severance. We paid for counseling. "Maybe," Jessica said carefully. "He blames you for what happened." "It was an accident. OSHA investigated. The report said there was worker negligence." Jessica's tone was neutral, but her eyes weren't. "Specifically, James Thompson's negligence. Improper safety harness use." Richard stood, walked to the window. Below, construction crews were already working on his newest project. Cranes moving, steel rising. "Pull the Riverside files," he said quietly. "All of them. I want to see the original investigation." "Sir, those files are sealed as part of the settlement." "I don't care. Pull them." Jessica typed a note into her tablet. "And the girl? Amara Thompson?" Richard turned from the window. "Find her address," he said. "I need to thank her for saving my life." What he didn't say, "I need to know if my company killed her father." At school, Amara's morning started with disappointment. Coach Davis called her into his office during lunch. He was a good man, one of the few teachers who saw past her worn sneakers and second-hand clothes. He'd coached her for 2 years, watched her arm get stronger, her accuracy sharper. "I got the information about the elite softball academy tryouts," he said, sliding a packet across his desk. "They're holding them next month." Amara's heart jumped. The East Side Elite Academy. College scouts went there. Full-ride scholarships came from there. Then she saw the number at the bottom of the page. Application fee, $500, plus equipment costs. Her heart sank back down. "I know it's steep," Coach Davis said gently, "but Amara, you're good enough. I wouldn't waste your time if I didn't believe that." "Can I pay in installments?" "They require it up front, by Friday." $500. Her mother made that in 2 weeks. After rent, food, bus fare, there was nothing left. Amara folded the packet, slid it into her backpack. "Thanks, Coach. I'll figure it out." But they both knew she wouldn't. After school, she walked to her shift at Morrison's Grocery. 4 hours stocking shelves for $9 an hour. Mr. Kowalski, the manager, was checking inventory when she arrived. "You hear about that billionaire who got attacked last night?" he said, scanning a clipboard. "News says it was Richard Whitmore." "Can you imagine having that much money?" Amara said nothing. She grabbed her scanner and started on aisle 3. She didn't tell him she was the one who'd saved that billionaire's life. Richard spent the morning in his private office with David Martinez, his head lawyer for 20 years. The Riverside files covered the conference table. Incident reports, OSHA investigations, settlement agreements, hundreds of pages. "These are the official documents," David said. "Everything was by the book. OSHA found worker negligence. James Thompson failed to secure his safety harness properly. The other 5 deaths were collateral. Equipment fell when the scaffold collapsed." Richard flipped through the pages, but something felt wrong. "Where are the pre-incident reports?" "Pre-incident? Safety complaints, inspection logs. Workers file those constantly on big projects." David shifted in his seat. "Those aren't typically kept after a project closes. Standard document retention policy." "I want to see them anyway." It took 3 hours, but they found them. Buried in archived digital files that should have been deleted years ago. Safety complaint, filed 8 days before the collapse. Signed by James Thompson. "The scaffold system on the east wing is overloaded. Manufacturer specs say maximum 4 workers at a time. Site manager is requiring 8 workers per platform to meet the deadline. This is a violation of safety codes. Request immediate inspection. Response from site manager Victor Santos, dated 2 days later. Complaint noted. Will address after the milestone deadline. Continue work as assigned or seek alternative employment. Richard read it 3 times. James Thompson tried to stop it, he said quietly. He filed a complaint. He warned us. David leaned over, read the document. His face went pale. This wasn't in the OSHA file. No, it wasn't. Richard kept digging. More emails, more complaints, all from James Thompson, all dismissed by Victor Santos. The final email was dated the morning of the collapse. From jthompson@whitmoredev.com to vsantos@whitmoredev.com. Subject, unsafe conditions, East Wing scaffold. Victor, I'm refusing to work on the East scaffold today until it's inspected. 8 men on a 4-person platform is negligence. I have a family, so do the other guys. Please, do the right thing. Victor's response, sent 20 minutes later, get on that scaffold or clean out your locker. Your choice. 4 hours after that email, the scaffold collapsed. James Thompson and 5 other men fell 40 feet to their deaths. Richard's hands trembled as he set down the printout. Victor threatened to fire him, Richard said. James went up on that scaffold because he needed the job, because we gave him no choice. David was silent for a long moment. Victor retired 2 years ago, he finally said. Took a generous severance package. He's living in Florida now. Richard looked up sharply. How generous? Standard executive retirement. Pension, bonus, lump sum. Why? How much was the lump sum? David checked his tablet. $250,000, paid out 1 week after the Riverside settlements were finalized. The room went cold. Richard stood, walked to the window. Below, his city continued its daily rhythm. People working, building, living. James Thompson tried to save his crew, Richard said. We killed him for it. Then we paid the man responsible $250,000. Sir, we didn't know. We should have. Richard turned from the window. Find Amara Thompson's address. I'm going to see her family. That's not advisable. Legally speaking, I don't care about it legally. Richard's voice was firm. That girl saved my life, and I think my company destroyed hers. Richard Whitmore had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but standing in the hallway of apartment 4C on the south side, he felt more nervous than he'd been in 20 years. He knocked. The door opened 6 inches, held by a chain lock. A woman's face appeared in the gap. Tired eyes. Guarded expression. Mrs. Thompson? Who's asking? Richard Whitmore, the man your daughter saved last night. The door slammed shut. Urgent whispers inside. Then the door opened again without the chain. Shanice Thompson stood blocking the entrance, arms crossed. Behind her, Amara stood frozen in the small living room. You have nerves coming here, Shanice said quietly. I know. Please, just 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Your company gave us 5 minutes before offering $50,000 to shut up about my husband's death. I'm not here to offer money, Richard said. I'm here to tell you the truth. Shanice stared at him, then stepped aside. The apartment was tiny but immaculate. A photo of James Thompson hung on the wall, arms around his family. Richard couldn't look at it. Why are you here? Shanice asked. Richard set a folder on the small table. Your husband filed safety complaints before the collapse, multiple times. He warned my site manager that the scaffolding was overloaded. He asked for inspections. He refused to work until conditions were safe. Shanice's breath caught. He was threatened with termination. So he went back to work. 4 hours later, he was dead. Silence except for the refrigerator's hum. The report said James was negligent, Shanice whispered. The report was wrong. Richard's voice was firm. My company buried his complaints. The site manager who threatened him got $250,000 in severance. We covered it up. Shanice sat heavily, opening the folder. Her hands shook reading her husband's emails, his complaints, his desperate final message. Amara moved closer, reading over her mother's shoulder. I'm reopening the investigation, Richard said. Independent investigators, full transparency, no cover-ups. Shanice looked up, tears streaming. Why? Guilt? Yes, but also because it's right. Amara spoke for the first time. Who attacked you? Marcus Rivera, another worker from that site. They blame me. Do they have a reason to? Richard met her eyes. Yes. I trusted my managers. That was my failure. Amara was quiet, weighing something. What do you want from us? To help you. Elite softball academy, full scholarship, college fund. Amara's jaw tightened. You're trying to buy us off. No, I'm trying to do what I should have done 3 years ago. I want the truth about my father more than I want your money, Amara said steadily. Can you give me that? Richard looked at this 14-year-old girl who'd saved his life, who'd lost her father because of his negligence, who demanded justice instead of charity. I'll try. Will you help me find it? Shanice looked at her daughter. It's your choice, baby. Amara looked at the softball in her hands. Her father's gift. Okay. But if you're lying, if this is just another cover-up, I'll make sure everyone knows. Richard nodded. Fair enough. Richard hired a private investigator to find Marcus Rivera. It took 2 days. He was living in a workers' shelter on the east side, broke and bitter. When Richard called, Marcus hung up twice. The third time, Amara spoke. Mr. Rivera, my name is Amara Thompson. James Thompson was my father. Silence. I just want to hear what happened, from someone who was there. Marcus agreed to meet at a community center. The place smelled like floor wax and coffee. Marcus sat at a folding table, hands wrapped around a foam cup. 51, but looked older, gray hair and weathered face. When Amara walked in with Richard and Shanice, Marcus stood. You look like him, Marcus said quietly. Same eyes. They sat. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Why should I talk to you? Marcus finally asked Richard. You're the enemy. Because I want the truth, Richard said. And I think you do too. Marcus laughed bitterly. The truth got buried with 6 good men. Then help me dig it up. Amara leaned forward. You said my father's name when you attacked him. Why? Marcus looked at her, then at Shanice, then down. Because your father saved my life, and I've lived with the guilt every day since. Shanice's hand found Amara's under the table. Marcus began talking. Slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. I was the foreman on the East Wing. Your father was one of my best welders. 15 years of experience. Never cut corners. He pulled out his phone, showed them a photo. 6 men in hard hats and safety vests, arms around each other, grinning. James Thompson was in the middle. That was us, the East Wing crew. He swiped to another photo showing a crowded scaffold platform with 8 workers and equipment everywhere. Manufacturer specs said 4 workers maximum. Victor Santos, the site manager, told us to put 8. We were behind schedule. He said we'd all lose our jobs if we didn't meet the deadline. My husband complained, Shanice said. Multiple times. James documented everything. Every violation. Every unsafe condition. He was trying to keep us alive. Marcus's voice cracked. The day before the collapse, I was supposed to go up on that platform. I had a sick kid at home. James switched shifts with me. He took my spot. Amara felt her mother's hand tighten. Next morning, I got the call. The scaffold collapsed. James fell 40 feet, 2 others with him. 3 more killed by falling equipment. Marcus wiped his eyes. I kept copies, he said suddenly. Victor told us to destroy all the complaint forms after the collapse. I didn't. He reached into a worn bag and pulled out a manila envelope stuffed with photocopies. Richard spread them across the table. Safety complaint forms signed by James Thompson. Text messages. Emails. One complaint form dated 1 week before the collapse showed the problem in James's handwriting. The scaffold was rated for 1,600 pounds. With 8 workers plus equipment, they were at 2,400. Dangerous. Victor had scrawled a response in red ink. They were behind schedule. Make it work, or he'd find someone who would. Another form from 3 days before. James wrote he was documenting everything formally. If someone died from ignored safety protocols, that was on management. Victor's response: stop wasting time with paperwork. The final document was a text exchange from the morning of the collapse. James texted Victor saying he was refusing to work on the east scaffold until it was inspected. He had a family. Please do the right thing. Victor texted back immediately. Get up there now or clean out your locker. Your choice. 4 hours later, James Thompson was dead. Shanice covered her mouth, tears streaming. Amara stared at her father's words, his handwriting, his desperate attempts to save his crew. He tried, Amara whispered. He tried to stop it. He did more than try, Marcus said. He fought. He documented everything, made Victor's negligence impossible to ignore, and they buried it anyway. Richard examined the documents. These were never in the OSHA investigation file. Someone made sure they disappeared. Victor, Marcus said flatly. He had friends in the inspector's office. The official report blamed James for not securing his harness properly. A lie. James was the most careful man on that site. Why did you keep these? Richard asked. Marcus looked at him directly. Because I knew someday someone would ask the right questions. I just didn't think it would take 3 years. While Richard and David Martinez began building a case, Amara started at the East Side Elite Academy. The campus looked like a college. Pristine fields, indoor facility, equipment that cost more than her mother made in a year. On her first day, Amara wore her old high school jersey. Every other girl wore academy gear. Coach Williams, a former Olympic pitcher, made introductions. This is Amara Thompson. She's joining us on a scholarship. Let's make her feel welcome. Most girls smiled. One didn't. Brooke Mitchell looked Amara up and down with disdain. Blonde hair, perfect, expensive sunglasses like a crown. During warm-up drills, whispers started. Heard she's here because she saved some rich guy. Charity case. Coach Williams called Amara to the mound. The other girls watched from the dugout. Show me what you've got, he said, handing her a ball. Amara took the mound, gripped the ball the way her father taught her, focused on the catcher's mitt. She threw. The ball cracked into the glove with a sound that echoed across the field. Perfect strike, 90 miles per hour. She threw again, same spot, same speed, 5 pitches, 5 perfect strikes. Coach Williams smiled. Welcome to the team. The whispers stopped, except Brooke, who muttered just loud enough, lucky throws. After practice, Amara called Richard from the bus. Did you get what you needed from Marcus? We did. These documents are evidence of criminal negligence. David thinks we can reopen the case. Good. Amara paused. Richard, thank you for the scholarship, but I'm not here because of charity. I'm here because I earned it. I know, Richard said. That's why it's not charity. It's justice. That night, Amara spread Marcus's documents across her bed. Her father's handwriting, his warnings, his courage. She picked up her softball, the one he'd given her, the one she'd thrown to save Richard's life. I'm going to finish what you started, Dad, she whispered. I promise. 3 weeks passed in a blur of progress. Amara's arm got stronger. Coach Williams worked with her every afternoon on technique and strategy. Her pitching speed climbed to 93 miles per hour. The other girls stopped whispering and started asking for advice. Even Brooke softened, just a little. After one particularly good practice, she nodded at Amara in the locker room. Not quite friendship, but not hostility either. At home, things were changing too. Richard had quietly paid off the 2 months of back rent Shanice had been drowning in. He also hired a better lawyer for her ongoing case against the construction company over unpaid benefits. The lawyer was optimistic. David Martinez confirmed that the case could be reopened. Multiple safety violations, suppressed evidence, retaliation against a whistleblower. The district attorney's office was reviewing the files. Marcus Rivera agreed to testify. So did 3 other workers who'd been on site that day. One evening, Richard invited Amara's family to dinner at his penthouse. Jaden was awestruck by everything. The elevator that moved without shaking, the windows that showed the whole city, the kitchen with appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. Are you a superhero? Jaden asked Richard seriously. Richard laughed. No, but your sister is. Amara felt her face get hot. They ate dinner at the table, real plates and silverware, food that Richard's chef had prepared. Shanice was quiet at first, still guarded, but slowly relaxed as Richard asked about her work and actually listened to the answers. Your daughter has real talent, Richard said. Coach Williams thinks she could get a full ride to any college she wants. She gets that from her father, Shanice said quietly. He was talented too, just never got the chance to show it. Richard met her eyes. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man James Thompson was. I promise you that. For the first time since her husband died, Shanice smiled. After they left, Richard stood at his window watching the city lights. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Whitmore? The voice was unfamiliar. You should stop digging into Riverside. Some things are better left buried. The line went dead. Richard stared at his phone, then at the documents spread across his desk. Marcus's evidence, James's complaints, Victor Santos's threats. He wasn't stopping. Not now. The article went live at 6 in the morning. Amara woke to 17 missed calls from Tiana and a text that just said, "Check the news." She opened her phone. The headline made her stomach drop. Billionaire exploits. Tragedy. Uses dead worker's daughter for PR stunt. The article was brutal. It claimed Richard was only helping Amara to avoid a reopened lawsuit, that the scholarship was hush money dressed up as charity, that Amara was a willing participant in the scheme. Worse were the quotes from anonymous sources. One claimed James Thompson had been drinking on the job the day of the collapse. Another said he'd ignored multiple safety warnings and put his crew at risk. A third said the Thompson family was now exploiting his death for financial gain. The comments section exploded. Thousands of them, each one crueler than the last. Gold digger. Her dad was probably drunk and now she's cashing in. These people will do anything for money. Some were explicitly racist. Amara stopped reading after the 5th one. Her phone kept buzzing. News sites were picking up the story. Her face was everywhere. Her name, her school, her address. She felt like she couldn't breathe. At school, everyone stared. Whispers followed her down the hallway. Some students looked sympathetic. Most just looked curious, like she was a zoo animal on display. Tiana met her at her locker. "Don't listen to any of it," Tiana said fiercely. "Everyone who knows you knows it's garbage." But at lunch, Brooke Mitchell approached their table. "So it's true?" Brooke said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Your dad was drunk and now you're cashing in on it?" Amara stood slowly. "What did you say?" "I said what everyone's thinking. You saw an opportunity and you took it. Can't really blame you, I guess. Must be nice getting paid to play the victim." Something inside Amara snapped. She shoved Brooke hard. Brooke stumbled backward, shocked. "My father was a hero," Amara said, voice shaking. "He tried to save his crew and they killed him for it. So shut your mouth about things you don't understand." Two teachers rushed over. Students were filming on their phones. Within an hour, Amara was in the principal's office. Suspended for 3 days. "Zero tolerance for physical violence," the principal said with genuine regret in his eyes. By the time she got home, the academy had called too. Suspension, pending review of conduct unbecoming. They'd make a decision by the end of the week. Amara sat on her bed, staring at her softball. Everything she'd worked for was crumbling. Her phone rang. Tiana. "This is so unfair," Tiana said. "Brooke started it. Everyone saw." "Doesn't matter," Amara said quietly. "Fair doesn't exist for people like me." Richard's day was no better. At 10 in the morning, a courier delivered a cease and desist letter, not from an outside firm, from Whitmore Development's own legal department. The company was suing him for misappropriating confidential documents, for violating settlement agreements, for damaging shareholder value. His own company was turning on him. At noon, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Richard sat at the head of the conference table he'd sat at for 20 years. 12 board members stared back at him. Most avoided his eyes. Thomas Brennan, the lead board member, spoke first. "Richard, your crusade is destroying shareholder value. Stock prices have dropped 6% in the last week. Our investors are nervous. Our competitors are circling." "6 men died," Richard said evenly. "We covered it up. That's more important than stock prices." "The matter was investigated and resolved," another board member said. "You're reopening old wounds for personal reasons." "Personal reasons?" Richard's voice rose. "James Thompson tried to save his crew. We ignored him and then blamed him for his own death." "That's the OSHA finding," Brennan said. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. We're voting to remove you as CEO unless you drop this investigation immediately." The room went silent. David Martinez leaned close to Richard and whispered, "They're using the company against you. Someone on that board was involved in the cover-up." Richard looked around the table. These were people he'd worked with for years, people he'd trusted. "Vote however you want," Richard said. "But I'm not stopping." He walked out. The call came at 2 in the afternoon. Marcus Rivera had been arrested. So had Richard, though his lawyers got him released within an hour. The charges were witness intimidation and making threats against a former employer. An anonymous tip to the police claimed Marcus had violated his probation by meeting with Richard. That Richard was pressuring witnesses to lie about the Riverside collapse. It was all fabricated, but the damage was done. Richard called Amara from outside the police station. "They're separating us," Amara said when she answered. "Taking away everyone who can help." "I know. Who's doing this?" "Victor Santos," Richard said. "He has connections to the board, the inspectors, maybe even the prosecutor. He's been pulling strings this whole time." "Then we need to prove it." "How?" Richard's voice was tired. "They've blocked us at every turn. Marcus is back in custody. The board is trying to remove me. The media thinks we're running a scam." Silence on the line. Then Amara spoke, her voice steady. "I saved your life. Now save my father's name." That evening, Shanice came home from work to find Amara sitting in the dark. "Baby, I saw the news," Shanice said, sitting beside her. "Maybe we should stop. This is destroying you." "If we stop, they win," Amara said. "Dad died for nothing." "Your father would want you safe more than he'd want revenge." "This isn't revenge." Amara looked at her mother. "It's justice." Shanice pulled her daughter close. "You're so much like him," she whispered. "Stubborn and brave and too good for this world." Amara's phone buzzed. A news alert. Breaking. Former Whitmore development site manager Victor Santos speaks out. She opened the article. Victor's face filled the screen, looking concerned and sincere. The quote beneath his photo made her blood run cold. "I'm heartbroken that Richard Whitmore is using this tragedy for publicity. James Thompson was a good man who made a terrible mistake. Trying to rewrite history won't bring him back." Victor was controlling the narrative, making himself the victim, painting her father as careless, and the public believed him. Amara stood, walked to her window. The city stretched out below, millions of lights in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Victor Santos was sleeping soundly, protected by money and connections and a system designed to shield people like him. But Amara had learned something in the past month. Systems could be broken. Sometimes all it took was one perfect throw. Amara called an emergency meeting at the community center. Richard and Marcus showed up. So did David Martinez, looking exhausted. Tiana came too, laptop under her arm. "We're losing," Richard said bluntly. "Victor controls the narrative. The board is against me. The public thinks we're scammers." "That's because we've been fighting their fight," Amara said. "On their terms. In their world." "What do you mean?" "Rich people talk to rich people. Lawyers talk to lawyers. Nobody sees construction workers." Amara looked at Marcus. "How many guys from the Riverside crew are still in the city?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Maybe a dozen. Most scattered after the collapse. Too scared to talk." "What if we gave them a reason to be brave?" Amara said. "Show them they're not alone?" Over the next 3 days, they visited former Riverside workers. The first 3 refused, too scared of retaliation, too afraid of losing what little they had left. The 4th worker was a woman named Elena Rodriguez. She lived in a small apartment with her 2 kids and worked at a laundromat. "I have pictures," Elena said quietly after they explained why they were there. "From the site, the violations." She showed them her phone. Photos of overloaded scaffolds, missing safety equipment, inspection sheets that had been falsified with dates that didn't match the actual work logs. "I kept them in case I got blamed," Elena said. "Never thought I'd use them." Marcus stared at the photos. "This is everything. This proves Victor knew." The 5th worker was Joseph Kim. He answered the door reluctantly and wouldn't let them inside. "Victor paid me," Joseph said through the cracked door. $5,000 to sign a statement saying James was careless. I needed the money. My wife was pregnant. I've regretted it every day. "Will you recant the testimony?" David asked. Joseph was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "If it helps clear James's name, yes." While they built their case from the bottom up, Tiana made a discovery. "I've been looking at Victor Santos's social media," she said, turning her laptop around. The screen showed vacation photos. Victor on a beach in the Bahamas. Victor on a yacht. Victor holding an expensive drink with an even more expensive watch visible on his wrist. "These were posted 1 week after the settlement," Tiana said. "The captions are all about hard work paying off." David leaned closer. "That vacation probably cost $30,000. Victor's salary was $75,000 a year." "Exactly," Tiana said. "The math doesn't work." David immediately filed a subpoena for Victor's financial records through a separate civil case. It took 2 days, but they got them. What they found was damning. 2 days after the 5 families settled their lawsuits, Victor Santos received a wire transfer of $250,000. The source was a shell company that took another week to trace. When they finally tracked it down, the shell company's registered agent was a construction lobbying firm. The same firm that represented 3 of Whitmore Development's biggest competitors. Richard stared at the paper trail. "They paid Victor to sabotage my project," he said slowly. "The deaths were collateral damage. They wanted regulatory problems, delays, bad publicity, so they could buy the properties cheap when I failed." "Victor helped them," Marcus said. He ignored the safety complaints. He overloaded the scaffolds. Then he buried the evidence and took the payoff. And when we started digging, Amara added, he fought back. The smear campaign, the arrests, all of it was him protecting himself. David was already on his phone. I'm calling the FBI. Wire fraud across state lines is federal jurisdiction. And if we can prove conspiracy to commit fraud and manslaughter, Victor is looking at serious prison time. But we still need him to confess, Richard said, or lead us to whoever paid him. Amara leaned forward. What if he thought he was getting another payout? What if he thought his partners were turning on him? Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. A trap. A sting, Richard corrected. But we'll need the FBI's cooperation. Then let's give them a case they can't refuse, David said, gesturing to the evidence spread across the table. Documents from Marcus, photos from Elena, financial records, Joseph's recantation, testimony from a dozen workers. It was enough. That night, Richard called Amara. The FBI is in. They'll set up the sting. If Victor takes the bait, we'll have him on recording. When? Amara asked. 3 days. Can you be ready? Amara looked at her father's photo on the wall, at the soft ball in her hands. Her mother was asleep on the couch after another double shift. I've been ready for 3 years. The FBI set the trap at a construction site on the north side. Agent Sarah Carter explained the plan. They would contact Victor through a burner phone, pretending to be his handler from the lobbying firm. The message would be simple. The prosecutor was flipping, and whoever talked first would get immunity. Victor would panic. He'd demand a meeting, and they'd record everything. He'll be armed with lawyers, Agent Carter warned. We get one shot at this. The call went out at 9 in the morning. By 10, Victor had responded. He wanted to meet that night at the new Whitmore construction site. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The site was empty after dark. Cranes rose like skeletal giants against the city lights. Construction equipment sat idle and silent. FBI agents were positioned throughout the site with cameras and recording equipment. Richard and Amara watched from a surveillance van 2 blocks away. You didn't have to be here, Richard said to her. Yes, I did, Amara replied. I need to see this. At 8:45, Victor Santos arrived. He parked his expensive car and got out, looking around nervously. He was in his late 50s with graying hair and an expensive coat. At 8:50, a black sedan pulled up. A man in a suit got out. The FBI had sent an undercover agent posing as Thomas Hartley, the executive from the competing construction firm. Victor approached quickly. What the hell is going on? Victor's voice came through clear on the surveillance equipment. You said I'd be protected. Plans change, the agent said coldly. The prosecutor is asking questions. Whitmore found documents. This whole thing is falling apart. I did what you paid me for, Victor said, his voice rising. I ignored the complaints. I overloaded the scaffolds. I made sure the OSHA report blamed Thompson instead of the company. I held up my end. In the surveillance van, Amara's breath caught. A confession. Clear and direct. You were paid to make the problem go away, the agent continued. Now you are the problem. I have evidence, Victor said desperately. Emails, wire transfers, bank records. If I go down, you're coming with me. The agent stepped closer. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Victor pulled out his phone. Sir, I kept copies of everything. Insurance. You think I'm stupid enough to trust people like you? The agent reached into his jacket. Victor flinched. FBI, don't move! Agents swarmed from every direction. Floodlights illuminated the site like daylight. Victor spun around, realizing too late he'd been set up. The undercover agent pulled out his badge. Victor Santos, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and 6 counts of negligent homicide. Victor's face went white. As they handcuffed him, he saw the cameras, the recording equipment, the FBI van. He'd given them everything they needed. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning. Every major news outlet in the city showed up. Reporters packed the Whitmore Development Conference Room. Cameras lined the back wall. The story had been building for weeks, and everyone wanted to be there for the finale. Richard stood at the podium with Amara on his right, Shanice on his left, and Marcus behind them. David Martinez stood nearby with boxes of evidence. The room fell silent when Richard began to speak. 3 years ago, 6 men died building my property. My company blamed the workers. Today I'm here to tell you we were wrong. He paused, letting the words settle. James Thompson was a master welder with 15 years of experience. In the weeks before his death, he filed multiple safety complaints about overloaded scaffolds and ignored regulations. He documented every violation. He asked for inspections. He begged management to do the right thing. Richard's voice was steady but heavy with emotion. He was threatened with termination if he didn't get back to work. So he did, because he had a family to feed, because he needed his job. 4 hours later, he fell 40 feet to his death along with 5 other men. Murmurs rippled through the reporters. My site manager, Victor Santos, ignored every warning. He was paid $250,000 by a competing firm to sabotage my project. The deaths were collateral damage in a corporate scheme. Last night, the FBI arrested Mr. Santos. He confessed to everything. Richard gestured to the screen behind him. Video footage played showing Victor's confession at the construction site. His words filled the room. I ignored the complaints. I overloaded the scaffolds. I made sure the OSHA report blamed Thompson. The room exploded with questions. Richard held up his hand. I could have handled this quietly, protected my business interests, settled behind closed doors. But this young woman taught me something about courage. He turned to Amara. Amara Thompson saved my life in an alley 4 weeks ago. She threw a softball and stopped 2 men from killing me. Those men were construction workers who blamed me for their friends' deaths. They had every right to be angry. Richard's voice grew stronger. Amara didn't know who I was when she saved me. She just saw someone who needed help. Later, when she found out my company had killed her father and destroyed his reputation, she could have walked away. Instead, she demanded the truth. He looked directly at the cameras. I built an empire. She reminded me what it cost. The room was completely silent. James Thompson was a hero. He tried to save his crew. We killed him for it. Then we paid the man responsible and buried the evidence. That ends today. Richard announced the creation of a $50 million worker safety fund. Independent safety inspections at all Whitmore sites. Full settlements for all 6 families with no strings attached. A memorial statue at the Riverside location honoring the 6 workers who died. And the James Thompson Memorial Scholarship for construction workers' children. Mr. Santos will face federal charges, Richard continued. So will Thomas Hartley and 3 members of my own board of directors who helped cover this up. I'm personally ensuring they're held accountable. A reporter called out, "Can we hear from Amara?" Amara stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. My father taught me that one perfect throw can change everything. I thought he meant baseball, but he meant life. She gripped the podium. When you see something wrong, you have a choice. Look away or act. He acted. It cost him his life. I acted. It gave me the truth. Her voice grew stronger. This isn't about money. It's about making sure no other kid loses their parent because someone wanted to save money or meet a deadline. She looked directly at the cameras. I saved your life, she said to Richard. He saved his crew. That's what heroes do. The room erupted in applause. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Every news channel, every website, social media exploded. The hashtag perfect throw. Perfect truth trended worldwide. The racist comments from before were drowned out by support. Millions of people are sharing the story, calling for justice, demanding accountability. Victor Santos's lawyer issued a statement saying his client would plead guilty. Thomas Hartley was arrested at his office. The 3 board members resigned and faced charges. The prosecutor's office opened investigations into the original OSHA report and everyone who'd been involved in the cover-up. Eastside Elite Academy called. Amara's suspension was lifted. They issued a public apology. Brooke Mitchell's family quietly withdrew her from the school. That evening, Amara sat with her mother and brother watching the news coverage. "Dad would be proud," Jaden said. Shanice pulled both her children close. "He is proud," she said. "Wherever he is, he's watching, and he's so proud." Amara looked at the softball in her hands, her father's gift. The one she'd carried for 3 years, the one that had started everything. One perfect throw really could change everything. 6 months later, the memorial was unveiled. The James Thompson Safety Plaza stood where the Riverside Towers once rose. 6 bronze statues depicted the workers who had died, each one life-sized. James Thompson stood in the center with a welding mask pushed up on his head and his hand raised in a wave. The inscription read, "They built our city. We owe them safety, dignity, and truth." Hundreds of people attended. Construction workers in hard hats, family members, community members who'd watched the story unfold. Marcus Rivera stood beside the statue of James, tears streaming. "He was my friend," Marcus said when asked to speak, "and he was a hero. This memorial makes sure no one forgets that." After the ceremony, everyone walked to the adjacent softball field built as part of the memorial complex. It was open to the public and free to use. Amara threw the ceremonial first pitch. Jaden caught it. "Was that perfect like Dad taught you?" he asked. Amara smiled. "Perfect enough." 2 weeks later was the state championship game. Bottom of the 9th inning, Amara's team down by 1. Bases loaded, 2 outs. Coach Williams called time. "I'm putting you at bat," he said. She handed the ball to the relief pitcher and grabbed a bat. In the stands, her family screamed. Shanice, Jaden, Tiana. Richard sat beside them, cheering. Marcus was there too, wearing his Whitmore Development safety vest with pride. The pitcher threw. Amara swung and connected. The ball soared high and deep, clearing the fence by 20 feet. Grand slam. Championship won. The field erupted. Her teammates mobbed her. Cameras flashed. But Amara looked up at the sky. "That was for you, Dad," she whispered. After the game, reporters surrounded her. "What's next for you, Amara?" "Full scholarship to Princeton. Engineering. I'm going to learn how to build things that don't fall down." "Will you still play softball?" "Of course, but education comes first. That's what my father would have wanted." A reporter asked about her father's legacy. "He left me more than a softball. He left me a mission. Make sure workers go home safe to their families. I'm just getting started." That night, the family ate dinner together. James's photo sat on the table with fresh flowers beside it. "To Dad," Jaden said, raising his glass of juice. "To James," Richard added quietly. "To heroes," Shanice said. They clinked glasses. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. People working, building, living. But somewhere in that city, because of one girl's perfect throw and one father's courage, things were a little bit safer, a little bit more just, a little bit better. 2 years later. Amara stood on a stage at Princeton University giving a talk titled "The Perfect Throw, When Courage Meets Opportunity." The auditorium was packed. Students, workers in construction gear, her family watching via video call. Richard and Marcus sitting in the front row. She told the whole story. The alley, the investigation, the fight for truth, the victory. "I threw a ball to save a life," she said. "My father sacrificed his life to save his crew. That's not special. That's human. We're all capable of that courage." She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. "The question is, will you take the throw?" The audience rose in a standing ovation. Text appeared on the screen behind her showing what had happened since that night in the alley. Victor Santos, 3 years in federal prison. Thomas Hartley, 15 years for fraud and manslaughter. 12 states had adopted the James Thompson Protocol for construction safety. 0 fatalities at Whitmore development sites since the reforms. The Perfect Throw Foundation had helped over 200 families get justice for workplace deaths. Richard Whitmore had stepped down as CEO to run a worker safety nonprofit full-time. Marcus Rivera was training the next generation of safety inspectors. And Amara Thompson was studying engineering at Princeton while pitching for their Division I softball team. The final slide showed a photo of James Thompson, in memory of 6 heroes who built our city. The screen faded to Amara's words. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. And the next time you see injustice, ask yourself, do you have the courage to throw? What injustice will you stand up to? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, subscribe to Black Tales Stories for more stories of everyday courage that change the world.